Hi class, let's take a few minutes and chat. I apologize that this video is posted so late. I recorded it this morning, but apparently I didn't actually press record. So sorry that you get post-gymnastics, post-work, crazy, brain dead, but that's okay. Okay, let's talk about where we were last week. Last week you turned in your JAS practice assignment and your final lit reviews. I'm going through those final lit reviews before I go through the JAS practice assignments because you will need those final lit reviews to help you write your final paper. You will be turning in that first version of your final paper as part of the peer review process that we're going to go through again. That final version is going to be due next Friday, the 20th of March. So I want to make sure you have that lit review done. You'll have the results and discussion section. You'll have some feedback done, though you may not get it before the 20th. So just have a heads up, those final lit reviews are coming your way. The JAS practice will come, but like I said, that will come second. A couple things I'm seeing in the lit reviews. Please make sure that you use personal pronouns sparingly. I say as a general rule in scientific writing, don't use personal pronouns at all. And so what do I mean by personal pronouns? I mean we, us, our, my, things like that. Well, your opinion is important to me. Remember that we're elevating you from student to researcher here. So as a researcher in a scientific paper, you would never say my opinion is, or I think. You would say things like the research indicates, or results show, things like that. You're going to take a step back from your personal opinion and let the data speak for itself. So please make sure that you are doing that in your writing. I'm seeing a lot of that. Another thing I'm seeing is it's like we're building a tower with the data. So we're going a little bit too in depth on certain topics within your lit review, and you're not presenting a broad thing. Remember, we're looking at this lit review as more of a table and less of a tower. If you want to ideally look at it, you want to look at it as a pyramid. You want to have a lot of information on that base topic and less information on those subtopics as you go up. You can either look at it as a pyramid or a funnel, whichever way you want to flip it, but we want to provide a really broad, thorough understanding of that base information and then less information on those subtopics as we go up. So please keep that in mind as you are moving forward with that. That has been one of the issues. Another issue is that some of the lit reviews are just not long enough. Remember that because you need to provide enough information, you really need to cover this topic. Yes, your final paper is going to be 5 to 7 pages, so your final lit review is going to be cut down. But you don't know at this point what you need to cut down until you're starting to look at that results section. As you see your results come in, you'll see that some of those original things included in your lit review are less relevant, and you can go ahead and cut those out for space. This is something you will have to do for the final paper, but it's not something that you want to do now with the lit review because you just simply will not have enough information going forward. There are going to be holes in the topic. Another thing, remember that this lit review is building to your research question. This is where you're going to explain why your research study is needed. If you don't provide that build-up, like previous research focuses on this, but very little information has been done on this, then we don't really understand where your research question needs to come in. Your research question in that final paper is going to come at the very end of the lit review introduction section. You're going to build up to it, say, like I just said, previous research shows, holes in previous research indicate that additional research is needed on this topic. This study will take that to answer the following research question. You're going to build into that, then segue neatly into your methods, results, and discussion section. So you've talked about the topic, you've explained why your particular research study is needed, and then you're going to move into what you did. That's the direction that we're moving with that. So keep that in mind with the final lit review. There were some people that did it well, but most people that I have reviewed so far need to make sure that that transition works well. Another thing, as you're looking at these topics within the lit review, make sure that you transition between topics. Yes, you may be using that heading to keep you on track, but you still need transition sentences. Well, this is a scientific paper. It should still be well written. I'm not asking you to write the great American novel, but I need the paper to flow together into one cohesive thing. I don't want it to be so you could take this one paragraph out entirely and you're fine, because the paragraphs are not connected to one another. Yes, you may have to do some shuffling. Yes, you may have to delete some things for space later, but everything should flow together neatly. Okay, Let's talk about the results and discussion section. This is where we're headed this week. If you haven't already closed your survey, please do so now. You need a couple of days to analyze the data and then a couple of additional days to do the write-up. The write-up for the results section is going to look very much like that JASP practice assignment that you turned in on the 7th, in that you are going to answer your research questions using the data provided. The majority of the statistical tests that you're going to run are frequency counts or frequency percentages. It's very easy. You don't panic about biostats. I know that for a lot of you, biostats was a while ago. Biostats was difficult. My goal is for you not to have a panic attack about it, because I would personally be having a panic attack. But I want you to look at the results in the context of your research question. You cannot answer your research question by looking at one or two of those survey questions. You need to go in depth. Look at how all of those survey questions relate to your research question and include the relevant information. In a lot of cases, that is going to be, as I said, frequency counts or frequency percentages, standard deviation, mean, median, mode, minimum, maximum, maybe range. You may take it a step further in some cases and look at some of those correlation statistics, maybe a little bit of regression analysis like you did this last week with that JASP practice. We don't need to do anything more complicated than what was done with the JASP practice. That being said, for many people, last week was the first time you ever used JASP. JASP is not the most user-friendly of programs. I understand that. Please use whatever statistical program that you find most user-friendly. If I was doing this, I would personally use Excel, because I am more familiar with Excel, because this is a relatively small data set. Whatever you've collected, it's fewer than 1,000 rows. So you should be fine with Excel. The other thing is Excel pairs really nicely with Word when you're creating those tables, charts, graphs, all of those kinds of things. It pairs really nicely, allows you to copy and paste, insert, change formatting as needed. Excel is my recommendation. However, you are more than welcome to use JASP, Data, SPSS, SAS, anything that suits your fancy that you feel comfortable running. Please go ahead and do that. Okay, so the results section. Remember, the results section is where you are answering your research question. You're not providing an interpretation of the results. You're saying that, for example, 35% of people said this, 70% of people said this. Okay, great. We don't necessarily want to talk about what that means yet. We actually don't want to talk about what that means yet. That is what the discussion section is going to be for. So the results section is where you're going to answer those research questions. Then the discussion section is where you're going to explain those answers. This is the so what of the paper. If you remember back when we were working on those synthesis grids at the beginning of the semester, I said when you were reading those initial articles that you were going to read the abstract, and if the abstract was good, then you were going to move on to the discussion section. And that's because the discussion section is the best part. Like, if this was a meal, the discussion section would be the raspberry cheesecake. Skip the broccoli, go for this. Okay, so in the discussion section, you're going to interpret your results. So in the results section, you say like 35% of people said this, 60% of people said this. This is where you're going to say what that means. Okay, so people said this, what does that mean? And then step 2, what does that mean within larger body of research? So how do these results compare with previous results and include citations? And this is where you're going to connect your study back to your lit review. So you found this. What did the previous researchers that you've already looked at in the lit review say? Why do you think there's a disconnect? Then you're going to look at the limitations of your study. Well, it was a convenient sample. It's problematic for several reasons. Explain why that's problematic. Maybe you didn't get a large sample size. Maybe your sample was very uniform and you were hoping for more diversity in the sample. Explain the study limitations and then make recommendations for future research. This recommendations for future research is probably going to be 2, maybe 3 sentences at max, because you won't have a lot of recommendations, but you need to be thinking ahead. So the discussion section is going to include the following pieces. First, it's going to include an interpretation of your results. So what do the results mean? Second, it's going to be putting your results into the larger body of research. So how do your results compare with everything else that you found? Third, the limitations of your study. And fourth, recommendations for future research. Do not blow off the discussion section. This is the best part. You want the cake at the end of the meal. You're eating the dinner because you want the cake. So do not blow this off. This needs to be more than one paragraph. The discussion section is not one paragraph. Give it equal play with these other sections in the paper. Please, please make it be a page and a half, 2 pages. You need the space. Okay, let's go rewind a little bit and go back to that results section. You don't need to talk about every single survey question. You only need to talk about the most relevant ones. Look at the data for every single one. Qualtrics will actually give you a lot of really good information. It'll give you these charts with the frequency percentages in it, and you can make a lot of your inferences from that. But pick out the most relevant information and then display it in the best way possible. In most cases, this is going to be a narrative form. You probably saw this in the JASP practice, that those tables take up a lot of room and they require some sort of interpretation in the text to make sense. So decide, is a table, chart, graph a better way to display the information, or is it better in some cases to just include it in the text? I would argue that in a lot of cases it's better to just include it in the text. If you do that, make sure that you are doing it in an APA format. Like I said last time, just make sure you Google APA format for statistics and it should come up. There's a lot of stuff out of the University of Washington that will show you. But it needs to look very much like that JASP practice assignment where the statistics are listed in parentheses, sometimes they're listed in italics, whatever the formatting guidelines are, make sure that you follow them. Remember, if you make any suggestion, you need to have the data to back it up. So if you say there was a correlation between 2 variables, you have to run the correlation analysis. If you say the majority of participants said this, you need to have the percentage so we know what the majority is. So let's talk about frequency count versus frequency percentage. I would argue that you should use frequency percentages in this paper because the percentage holds more weight than the count. If you were to say 35 people said this versus 50 people that said this, that's interesting, but I'm not going to remember. By me, I mean the reader in general is not going to remember how many people answered your survey. But if you say 40% of respondents said this versus 60% that said this, that holds a lot more weight. If you want the actual counts in there, say 40% parentheses the actual count, then go on with that. But I think that using the percentage provides more clarity and gives more weight to what you're trying to say. Okay. So next thing, we are going to be going through that peer review process again, just like the lit review. So if you were one of those people that chose not to participate with the lit review, peer review process, please don't be that again. Please do it with the research paper. Your group assignments will come out early next week. Your draft will be due. I believe the course says on the 20th, that may be incorrect and it may be the 21st, but your draft will be due to that discussion board sometime late next week. Then you have a couple of days, a week actually, to make those recommendations to your peers and to post that back to the discussion board. One of the things I saw in the peer review, lit review, is that some of the comments people gave were not useful at all. So make sure your comments are useful. I'll post a rubric again like I did last time. Hopefully I won't be so late to the party on that. I recommend that you use that rubric in addition to the comments, because you're going to see that a lot of people missed points because they didn't address each of those areas. If you're using that rubric in conjunction with making comments in the paper, I'll be able to go through easier and say, oh, you did this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. I know that you addressed those things. As I'm hunting them down, it is hard to make sure that I did that correctly. Also, if you are one of the people who makes like 1 comment per page, that's not going to be enough. Lots of comments are good. You can comment on things people did well, things people did wrong, but 1 comment per page probably isn't going to cut it because none of these papers are perfect. If I was to write it, it would be nowhere near perfect either, and you would need to make a number of comments throughout. So I'm not telling you to be excessively harsh to your peers, but you need to provide them with good comments. What would you want to see from your peers? I would venture to guess that you want to see good comments. So please do that. Please continue with those personal application assignments. The third and final check will take place on the 28th of March. I will start that third and final check on the 28th of March. So I will be looking for posts that were done between the 23rd and 28th of March, and you will receive your score on that third check sometime the week of the 30th of March. Then you will receive a little checklist that tells you what you are missing. It is very helpful if you check yourself as well, because it's very time consuming and there are a lot of you, so I'm going to miss things. So make sure that you are checking. Did you get 3 job application postings that have something to do with research where you explained how this relates to your goals? Did you do 3 case studies? Did you do 3 of those choose your own adventure, more spiritually related things? And then did you do 3 additional posts? You could take one from each of the categories. Make sure that you are paying attention to those personal application assignments. Okay, last and final thing. As public health instructors, we've been asked to tell our students what we're doing for COVID-19 in our non-BYU Idaho life. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing for COVID-19 in my non-BYU Idaho life. In my non-BYU Idaho life, I have 3 kids, so we're washing our hands a lot, but beside the 3 kids, I'm the manager at the county health department. So we are doing a lot there. I am sitting in on meetings with other county agencies, and we are discussing changes that need to be made to our pandemic plan. I'm sure that you all live in areas that have pandemic plans. Most counties have them. School districts have them. A lot of businesses have them. So we're sitting in, we're making adjustments to that plan. The plans are typically built around pandemic flu, but we're seeing that COVID-19 it has some differences to pandemic flu. One being there's no immunization available. So that's one of the things we're doing. We're working with local agencies, including the school district, to determine what cleaning protocols need to be put in place and when we need to make that call to close schools. Since most of you don't live in Georgia, you're probably not aware that they closed the Fulton County schools for several days. They closed them yesterday because a teacher was diagnosed with COVID-19. Fulton County Schools serves the Atlanta metro area. It has roughly 100,000 students, so it's pretty big. My county is the one just north of that. We're in Forsyth County. And our school district probably serves about 40,000 students. So one of the things we're doing is monitoring the health of all of the teachers within the district and making decisions. If we were to have to close a school, what would that look like? What would that look like for the district? How long would that have to be? What kind of cleaning, decontamination crews have to come in and take care of the school? We're seeing in a lot of cases that COVID-19 isn't as dangerous for children as it is for other people. So maybe the protocols we're taking for the schools are different than the protocols we're working with in the senior center in the community or with other agencies that may serve the elderly population. Another thing they do in the state of Georgia is that every year each health district is required to participate in some sort of disaster drill. And so the state of Georgia is broken into health districts, and then those health districts are further broken down into county health departments. I'm part of District 2 Public Health, and District 2 Public Health serves 13 counties in North Georgia. So we serve everything from Forsyth County, which is the northern part of the Atlanta metro area, all the way to the North Carolina border. So we go from suburbia all the way up into very low population areas that tend to be more mountainous, a lot of vacation homes, a lot of poverty, a lack of access to healthcare resources. So for District 2 Public Health this year, actually our drill is next week. We are actually simulating a pandemic. So if there were to be some sort of pandemic event in that northern area, how would they deploy the supplies? So this drill requires that we get some of the pods, and the pods, there's different pods for depending on what kind of disaster. So if there were to be a fire, a flood, a hurricane, they have different strategic stockpiles that can be deployed to different regions. We're going for the pandemic one, And it will be escorted from its strategic location up to where the disaster is taking place. And then from there, all the people that would need to be involved in helping to control that are going to take on their roles. Because that is going on in a different health department, I'm actually not participating in that, but there are members of our district team who are going and practicing what they would do in the case of that emergency. As part of my day job for the county health department, I am participating in tabletop activities and simulations for what we will do if COVID-19 hits Forsyth County, Georgia, or any of our surrounding areas in a significant manner. So right now, Fulton County, which is just south of us, they have about 5 cases. The Atlanta Metro has about 5 cases of COVID-19. So not a huge number, but next week we are going to meet in the command center, and everyone is going to take their place, and we're going to pretend that COVID-19 has hit. So what do we do? What is the health department's role in that? What kind of communication are we sending out? How are we communicating with people above us? So how am I communicating with District 2 Public Health? How are we communicating up to the State Department of Public Health? Those kind of things. We're going to be in the same room as fire, EMS, schools, other county facilities, water treatment, and some of the major businesses that are located in our county and surrounding areas. So they're going to give us a simulation, or they're going to give us a scenario, and then we're going to play it out and have people observe basically how we're going to play out COVID-19. So that is both exciting and a little scary that we might not get it right, but I guess we're just practicing. So that's good. Another thing we're doing in public health, and I'm sure a lot of your other public health instructors are doing that, depending on what capacity they work in, but most definitely if they work at the county government level, they are doing this. We have all been asked to update all of our FEMA training. So in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, FEMA created some courses called the NIMS courses, and these tell public health officials, really any official that works in some kind of emergency capacity, how to react to a disaster. Well, this is actually in the wake of 9/11. So in 9/11, you had a lot of chiefs, and there wasn't a lot of communication or working together of those groups. So with Hurricane Katrina, they decided to put things in place so that you had one central command center, and that person or that group of people were deploying the supplies, the personnel, so that they could meet and talk about what needed to happen, and resources were being shared correctly. They weren't sending people into harm's way unnecessarily. They weren't sending 2 people to the same place. So actually, if you're interested, FEMA offers free training. FEMA NIMS training, I believe it's 100, 200, 800. Those are the basic ones that tell you how the FEMA Incident Command Center works. And that is what is used in local, state, and federal disasters. They use all of those same things. So as you increase in your training for FEMA, you start to do some of those real life scenario exercises. So I'm participating in those next week as well, again, related to a pandemic. In the event that this ramps up more, we need to know what our exact role is, so that when and if it happens, we are able to do that without as much confusion. So the role the public health department plays is going to be different in every state. In the state of Georgia, the public health department is going to take a more administrative role. We're going to handle a lot of the monetary things related to a disaster, a lot of the supplies ordering. A lot of ordering supplies, a lot of maintaining records, deploying supplies as well. In some cases, deploying medical personnel, and keeping track of people that may be evacuated to us. So in the past, in Georgia particularly, people from other disaster areas have been sent here to shelter. So from hurricanes in Florida and the Carolinas, the Gulf Coast, as they've had that, they've shipped people in. So for example, with Hurricane Katrina, I mean, I was still at BYU at the time, but I hear that people were sent here during Hurricane Katrina. And what the public health department did is kept track of where those people were, kept track of their medications, tracked down their medications, got them in touch with medical providers as needed, notified family members that they were no longer in Louisiana, but now they were here in the Atlanta metro area. So things like that. If you are interested in doing any FEMA training, or if you are interested in working with the Medical Reserve Corps, this is a great time to start doing that. But that's just a little bit about where we are with COVID-19 in my little public health world. And I'm sure that your other instructors are sharing information about what they are doing with COVID-19 in their public health sphere. But it's an exciting time. Public health is all over the news. Let me know if you have any questions this week about the results and discussion section, the comments on your final lit review, or anything else that we have coming up.